And we have also achieved very important results through our mid-range and deep strikes. Russia is facing clear fuel shortages in the temporarily occupied territories and in parts of central Russia, as well as serious damage to its logistics.
St. Petersburg is burning as Russian authorities warn that Moscow's response to what it calls renewed Ukrainian aggression could escalate to the nuclear level, sending shockwaves through diplomatic and military circles worried about an unprecedented intensification of the conflict. Ukrainian drones have struck energy and military installations in and around St. Petersburg, targeting critical infrastructure in a campaign that Moscow says represents a dangerous crossing of lines and that Western capitals view as a sign of Kiev's growing operational reach. President Zelensky's attempts to disrupt high-profile Russian gatherings, what some described as an effort to sabotage a Davos-style forum, appear to have enraged Vladimir Putin, hardening his posture and diminishing space for back-channel de-escalation. As tensions rise across Europe, Russian forces have deployed a nuclear-capable submarine into waters near NATO patrol areas, a provocative move intended to signal Moscow's readiness to use strategic assets as leverage against Western support for Ukraine. The Barents Sea has again become a focal battleground in Moscow's standoff with NATO, with analysts warning that repeated military maneuvers and nuclear-capable deployments there risk turning the northern maritime theater into a flashpoint for a confrontation that could spiral toward a nuclear crisis. St. Petersburg was hit by a wave of drone strikes as international guests gathered for a high-profile forum dubbed the Russian Davos, turning what was meant to be a showcase event into a scene of alarm and disruption across the city. Several long-range Ukrainian drones targeted energy and military sites on June 3rd, striking multiple installations in coordinated attacks that Moscow says demonstrated Kiev's ability to reach deep into Russian territory. Loud explosions and thick black smoke billowed high above the city after an oil terminal took direct hits, creating dramatic visuals that were captured by residents and quickly circulated across social and international media. The Guardian reported on June 3rd with initial details of Ukraine's drone operation against Russia, citing sources and eyewitness accounts that described the scope and timing of the strikes. Ukraine also struck the Kronstadt naval base and the Leningrad shipyard in the assaults, hitting facilities that hold strategic value for Russia's northern maritime forces. Importantly, the Leningrad shipyard is home to vessels and infrastructure for Russia's Baltic fleet, making it a symbolically and operationally significant target in the strikes. The corvette Boyki, which was in dry dock undergoing repairs, caught fire during the attack, a damaging incident for the shipyard and a visible indicator of the strike's immediate impact on naval assets. Analysts and reporters framed Ukraine's operation as an embarrassing setback for Moscow, especially because President Putin was expected to deliver remarks at the forum, heightening the political sting of the attack. In previous years, President Putin has used the forum to court Western investors and burnish Russia's economic credentials, a practice that made the timing of the strike particularly delicate for Kremlin messaging. Some international guests were unable to fly into St. Petersburg after the city's airport was temporarily closed, disrupting travel plans and underscoring the broader logistical fallout from the attacks. Organizers had expected around 20,000 visitors from roughly 130 nations to attend the three-day summit, a large international turnout that amplified the global visibility and diplomatic consequences of the security breach. Zelensky said, and I quote, "Our long-range sanctions carried out by the warriors of the Security Service of Ukraine, the Unmanned Systems Forces, the Special Operations Forces, the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, and the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine have yielded good results. Important facilities on Russian territory were hit last night. Among them was the Petersburg oil terminal. The distance from Ukraine's state border to this facility of Russia's oil industry, which serves the war, is about 1,100 kilometers. Purely military targets at the Kronstadt base were also hit. Another target was an enterprise in the Tambov region involved in the production of Russian weapons. The distance from the front line is almost 600 kilometers. I thank our warriors for their precision. Ukraine's plan for long-range sanctions is being implemented exactly as needed to bring peace closer. Glory to Ukraine." Unquote. Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov issued a public comment outlining how Moscow might respond to the recent attacks, framing the situation in stark terms and signaling potential retaliatory options that could shape the Kremlin's next moves and international reactions.
I'd like to remind you of the statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which said that our responses will be systematic in nature, and indeed they already are. That's the first point. As for the strike specifically, information about them is entirely the prerogative of regional authorities and the Ministry of Defense. But, generally speaking, I can say that the special military operation is ongoing so that such strikes don't occur in the future.
In a major escalation, Russia's deputy foreign minister has issued what amounts to a direct nuclear threat, openly warning about the circumstances in which Moscow could resort to atomic weapons. Sergei Ryabkov specifically warned Ukraine and its Western allies against any aggressions toward Russia, hinting that such actions could provoke a catastrophic response. He made these remarks on June 3 on the sidelines of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, using an economic showcase to deliver a strategic warning. Sergei Ryabkov said, and I quote, "As regards us, those hypothetical extreme situations that may trigger the use of these weapons were outlined in detail in Russia's military doctrine and the fundamentals of Russia's state policy on nuclear deterrence. To put it somewhat straightforwardly, these documents send a signal that encroachments on Russia or its territorial integrity by aggressors, including those who may possess such weapons, could prompt us to use these weapons in the worst-case scenario." End quote. As the conflict in Ukraine continues, Moscow is placing renewed emphasis on demonstrating the strength of its strategic naval forces. Russia's Northern Fleet unveiled dramatic footage of a missile test conducted by its newest nuclear-powered submarine, the Arkhangelsk. According to Russian military officials, the exercise was completed successfully in the Barents Sea without any reported complications. The test involved the launch of an Onyx cruise missile, while the submarine remained fully submerged beneath the surface. Russian officials said the missile accurately hit a mock enemy warship position, approximately 200 kilometers away. The exercise took place in the Arctic, an area Moscow considers critical for both defense planning and strategic deterrence. The Barents Sea in the Arctic is located off the north coasts of NATO member nation Norway and Russia. The sea is divided into territorial waters of Russia and Norway. The Arkhangelsk is among Russia's latest generation Yasenem submarines, designed to enhance the Navy's long-range strike capabilities. Military officials claim the submarine's reduced acoustic signature makes it significantly harder for adversaries to track underwater. The platform is capable of deploying a variety of advanced weapons, including Caliber cruise missiles and Sircon hypersonic missiles. The nuclear-powered submarine formally joined active service late last year and is now a key asset in Russia's Northern Fleet. A Ukrainian drone struck a passenger bus in the city of Yenikievo on June 3, according to initial reports from Russian-installed authorities in the area. The head of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic said 7 civilians were killed in the strike, underscoring the human toll of attacks along contested front lines. Denis Pushilin added that 11 other passengers on board suffered injuries of varying severity, with some reportedly in critical condition after the explosion and ensuing fire. The bus was traveling on a long-distance route from Moscow to Simferopol in Crimea when it was hit, suggesting the attack occurred on a major transit corridor used by civilians. Videos and images from the scene showed the vehicle almost completely destroyed by the blaze, with only the charred frame and scattered debris left recognizable as a bus. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova condemned the strike, describing it as a deliberate hunt for people and accusing Kiev of terror tactics against civilians. Russian media outlets alleged that Ukraine had carried out similar attacks on highways before, claiming a pattern of drone or missile strikes on civilian road traffic in Russian-controlled areas. Kiev, however, has repeatedly denied deliberately targeting civilians during the conflict, insisting that its drone and missile operations are aimed at military or logistical objectives. The incident came one day after large-scale Russian strikes on what Moscow described as military targets inside Ukraine on June 2, in a wider escalation of cross-border attacks. Those Russian strikes left at least 21 people dead and more than 100 injured in Ukraine, according to local authorities there, highlighting how both sides' operations are exacting a heavy civilian price. Kiev, Dnipro, and Kharkiv were among the cities targeted in a major overnight missile and drone barrage. Officials said the attacks damaged residential areas, commercial properties, and key infrastructure facilities. The city of Dnipro suffered some of the heaviest losses during the latest Russian assault. Missile and drone attacks in Dnipro left multiple people dead and several others wounded. Images emerging from the city showed shattered homes and buildings partially reduced to rubble. Rescue teams remained on the ground, searching damaged structures for possible survivors. The strikes came amid fresh Russian vows to retaliate for the recent attack in Staroselsk. Kiev faced repeated waves of drone attacks as Russian forces carried out a large-scale overnight assault. Residents spent hours under alert as explosions and air raid sirens rang out across the capital. One residential building sustained major damage after being hit in what officials described as a double-tap strike. The attack triggered multiple fires at business premises, construction areas, and fuel stations across the city. Emergency crews were deployed across Kiev after the strikes left at least 20 people injured. The latest attacks came just days after President Zelensky warned that Russia was preparing a new large-scale strike against Ukraine. Zelensky said Ukrainian intelligence had detected signs that Moscow was planning another major wave of missile and drone attacks. The Ukrainian president also expressed concern over shortages of air defense systems needed to intercept ballistic missile threats. As the assault unfolded, Poland scrambled its air force along with allied aircraft to safeguard NATO airspace near the conflict zone. The new barrage came only days after Russia launched one of its biggest attacks, firing 90 missiles and 600 drones across Ukraine. The war has claimed more lives after another deadly incident struck Russian-controlled Crimea. Russian authorities said the strike left multiple casualties and triggered an emergency response in Simferopol. The announcement came directly from Crimea's Russian-installed leadership as details of the attack began to emerge. First responders rushed to the scene as officials worked to assess the damage and assist those affected. Sergei Aksyonov said, and I quote, "As a result of an enemy strike on non-residential buildings in Simferopol, 3 people were killed and 7 were wounded, according to preliminary reports. First responders are working on the site." Unquote. Moscow blamed Ukrainian forces for the strike and said non-military locations were among those affected. Ukraine has not responded to the accusations, while independent confirmation of the incident remains unavailable.